to this meeting of the Puroto Amua Committee for the 23rd of June. A very warm welcome to colleagues and also to members of the public. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Please be assured that we are making provisions for going into alert level 2 tomorrow. But we're all good at the moment. So if people could stand for the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana, he atukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Right. So we have apologies from Councillor Sparrow. Are there any other apologies that people know of? Mayor Foster, I think, did have a commitment, so I'll put him in as an apology. Are there any others? No. Have we got anyone on Zoom?
Yes.
Not councillors.
No councillors. All right. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to move those two apologies. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Young. So if we can vote now. Thank you.
I've got yours, Blue.
Okay, so is that vote? That was just apologies from Councillor Sparrow and Mayor Foster. For lateness. Okay, we'll put those on as well. Thank you. Right, everyone. Oh, Councillor Foon, just, yep. Oh, you've got... Right, thank you, councillors. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? No, all right, thank you. And we just now need to confirm the minutes from the 22nd of June. I'm going to move those. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Paul. Any debate? Okay, so those in favour, press 1. Those against, press 2. Thank you. Okay, so there are no items not on the agenda. And what we do have are some wonderful public participants. So, councillors, you should have the numbers of the submissions with you somewhere. Yep, so we will be going in order. Public participants, just to assure you that I'm on my computer to look at your submissions, not fiddling on Facebook or anything like that. Right, so Ellen Blake from Living Streets Aotearoa, a warm welcome to you. Oh, Ellen. Hi, Ellen, sorry. Welcome.
Kia ora tātou. Shall I just launch in, Iona?
Do you want a warning at 9 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure, not a problem.
Just from this angle, I can look over your shoulder to see what you're doing on your computer anyway.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
I know you're not on Facebook.
Yeah, okay, excellent, thank you.
So, well, kia ora tātou, everybody, on this really strange day again. Thought it was really important to be here because this parking and traffic bylaw is where the shoe leather hits the footpath in all the policy decisions that you've made so far. So there's a lot of policy that supports pedestrians at the top of the transport hierarchy, for instance, that supports climate change initiatives and a whole range of great urban living things. But we need to get it right in the bylaw so that we have can do some enforcement and do all the good things that we want. So I wanted maybe two things to get out of coming and doing this today, and one was a commitment from councillors that the transport hierarchy is in fact what we're working to, and the transport hierarchy has pedestrians at the top, so we design with pedestrians in mind, we make our rules with pedestrians in mind, and filter down to other road users, because one of the reasons I say that is because I don't see that in this bylaw. And the other thing I would like to get from today is that the staff would please give us a response point by point on what we put into this, into our submission. And I say that because as I go through, there's a lot of inconsistencies and things that don't quite marry up with the policy, with what's in the bylaw. So I'm pretty sure you might have all had a read of it, so I'm not going to go over every point. But one of the first things is that the definitions are not, in many cases, robust enough. For instance, the definition of business says that it's any business that pays business rates. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of business in Wellington that don't pay business rates, all your mobile food carts and things, for instance. So it needs to marry up with anybody who has a trading in public places bylaw permission as well, who are also businesses. These are a lot of these places might be operating on the footpath. The micromobility and electric scooter definitions don't marry up very well. The electric scooter one says it's for auxiliary motor vehicles. Well, everybody knows that electric scooters don't have, the electric motor is the only thing that makes them go. They're not push ones. The micromobility vehicle definition doesn't include skateboards, push scooters or other sorts of new tech that we are seeing on our footpaths. So there's a whole lot of definitions there that we really needs to be tight and enforceable. There's no point in having a bylaw if you can't enforce it, and people are going to argue the toss with all the enforcement officers. We really support having that oversized vehicle inclusion in here, but we need to know what a standard parking space is. And I think it would be really useful to have that in here as well. So there's quite a lot of things on definition, like what is a transport station? Never heard of one. Who is the, what do we call it? The, something about a traffic officer. I don't know what a traffic officer is either. So there's a lot of definition issues that really need to be sorted out, and they absolutely no way you should approve this until those are sorted out. So in specific parts, and one of the reasons why I say that we need to be clear about definitions is what is a shared path? Now, the transport legislation is very clear on what that is, but your parking bylaw is not as clear. It seems to be supporting shared paths. If we have pedestrians at the top of the transport hierarchy, shared paths are not best practice. Footpaths are best practice for pedestrians. Sharing with vehicles is not safe for pedestrians, and we're going to hear people talk about that at the summit tomorrow, which I think is still going ahead. We had a recommendation what we wanted to happen with that. So we think that there's some paragraphs in here about the necessity of shared paths should be just removed, and the commitment to the transport hierarchy should be reinforced. What else we don't know what cruising is. I'm not sure about the restriction on light vehicles. So if we can't easily understand it, I don't think other people will be able to either. We totally support that parking on berms is prohibited, but it's a bit unclear what that means in relation to unformed roads, because sometimes unformed roads are part of the berm. So sometimes what's in the written as the bylaw doesn't match up with the policy that's in the discussion for this bylaw. So we've got a recommendation to remove some clauses from the berm parking one. So that shared path thing in particular would be really keen to make sure that doesn't get included in any parking bylaw decision. Other areas that were completely missed were things like Cuba Mall, which is our one and only pedestrian space. That needs to make sure that we include that as a no parking area. I say this, it's kind of obvious, but I say that because we know that in Lower Cuba Street, when that got made into a shared zone, that in fact the parking enforcement has never worked there, and it's been difficult. So it needs to be really clear that we can do enforcement where we need to. There's another issue around, for all of Wellington, around intersections. Cars are supposed to park 6 metres back from the intersection. This is really important for children crossing the road so that they can step out a little bit, free of parked cars, and look up and down the road before they cross. There's nothing in this parking bylaw to support that. We definitely support demand responsive parking charges. And we'd also like to see in here some rules around driveways as they cross the footpath. We're seeing in Wellington that people can have as much driveway as they want. So sometimes, as I understood it, the policy was you have 1 car width wide driveway, but we see 2, 3, 4 car widths wide of driveway, which means that people walking along have to be exposed potentially to that much vehicle movement from very many different driveways. One of the things we're seeing in Wellington, which I hope the district plan will address, is the height of fences around driveways. And there's a whole range of issues around driveways, and I think that this parking bylaw can support that, but it doesn't at the moment. And we definitely support maintaining the current standard parking space. Now, the parking bylaw asks an interesting question about what is the alternative to parking on the footpath. Well, as far as I understood, the council had already decided that parking on the footpath is no longer permitted as a discretionary activity for enforcement officers. So if an enforcement officer comes across people parking on the footpath or gets a complaint about it, they should be giving them a ticket currently. The whole parking bylaw thing seems to have pulled way back on that. And as we read, there's a 3-month education period that's supposed to be happening in there. If the councillors want safe footpaths, I think we need to see a very firm commitment to no parking on the footpaths. Living Streets has over many years come up with many different ideas of how you can manage parking in areas where, for instance, there's no footpath, like on Newport Terrace. You can calm that street down so the cars do go slowly and there's an interaction with people walking along, because there is no alternative at the moment. So a lot of our tiny little dead-end streets could be turned into shared zones, but they need to look like shared zones. They need to not look like places you can speed along, which is one of the reasons why people park on the footpath, so you can speed up and down the street. So we either have a safe footpath or we have a well-designed shared zone. I think it's really important that those things are clear in this parking bylaw. So that's why I'm asking for a commitment from councillors to the transport hierarchy, so that pedestrians are top of the heap, if you like, when you're making decisions about the roading network and who gets to have to move their vehicle off the footpath and things like that. And I also are very keen to have a response point by point from staff about why some of these things are like they are and what they're going to do to fix some of them. And I think that's probably enough said from me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That was really great. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Rush.
Hi, Ellen. You've mentioned the transport hierarchy a number of times. Is it an absolute, or is there some flexibility in regards to the trade-offs between walking and cycling and motor vehicles?
The council's adopted policies that support the transport hierarchy, with a sustainable transport hierarchy it's called. So it's having pedestrians at the top. You're planning your streets and communities for pedestrians. Yeah. And currently our law supports that as well. But currently the practice is the complete opposite. So currently cars dominate, cars get the most of the funding, and people will really complain bitterly if they have to if they can't park directly outside their house or something. So that we've already got the trade-off. The trade-off is that we don't have good pedestrian infrastructure. This council has made many decisions that that is not the way we want to go in the future, and we totally support that. We want places that are nice for people to live in. We want places that it's safe for children to walk in. We want places that it's safe for blind people to cross the road and walk along without bumping into vehicles. And I say that because I just heard a story this morning about somebody who had trouble with that. So we've already got the situation being imposed on us from government with the e-scooters where people fall over them on the footpath. So we don't have a balance at the moment. The balance is all in favour of vehicle users, particularly car users.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ellen. Really appreciate your time, and we will take that submission in consideration. Thank you. Keep safe. Right.
Couple of those scooters.
Kate, welcome to you. So you're going to be speaking as part of an association and as an individual. Okay, cool.
Is that like that? Oh, okay. Yep. And like that? Is that hearable? Okay, good, because I've got a bit of a cold. Yes, and there'll be, as an individual, if I go a little bit over.
Oh, sorry. Could you just speak into the microphone?
Okay. Is it coming?
Sorry. Look, Kate, really sorry. I've just had a question asked about your cold.
Yes.
Just given the current environment. Speaking into the Right. Sorry. I see what you mean, Councillor Paul. Sorry.
Okay.
So. The officer will, it's just that we've got someone online and you can't hear if you don't speak into the microphone. So the officer will sanitise it. Yeah, sorry, we're just being very cautious at the moment for obvious reasons.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Okay. So I'll be speaking for 10 minutes as mid-hanky, and then for the other 5 minutes as an individual. But I'm just thinking there is a bit of overlap, and so it might make sense to sort of merge them together. But we'll see if we just get through quite well. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents now of Mount Cook, and I just want to let you know that we support the hierarchy, the transport hierarchy, and we support giving precedence to pedestrians. But I also just want to say that what our submission is about will not actually disadvantage pedestrians. So it's quite compatible. And what we're suggesting is some principles that can be applied, not just to Mount Cook, not just to Mid-Hankey, but to streets that are like Mid-Hankey, which surround and border on central Wellington. So I think you'll walk away from this with some principles that will be useful for you in addressing submission question number 23, which is how do you manage the bylaw for footpath parking when there is on narrow streets where footpath parking has been customary. So we've got some practical suggestions for you. I just want to say that we provide coupon parking for the CBD. Mid-Hankey provides about 35 car parks, not only for the CBD, but also for Massey students as well. The footpath parking ban will effectively have those parking spots. And those parking spots actually serve a bit of a public good. They're beyond just our residents. They're for Massey students, and they're for CBD workers. The footpath parking ban will draw a de facto yellow line along one side of our street because it's parking on the footpath, which has given our street that little bit of extra width by hitching a wheel on the embankment footpath. Now, 3 years ago, our Residents Association was formed to more or less to lobby for a widening and addressing that issue, and that is on the overhead our petition that sort of started things off in 2018. Since that time, we've met on site with transport engineers who all say there's a straightforward fix, but that they're hands are tied by you people. That's right. They say they can fix our street, and it's easy, and they have 2 options, but their hands are tied by council. So I hope that at the end of this presentation, you people here will all be signaling to staff that in specific situations, staff will have the latitude to consider and act in a more broad way if specific and strict criteria are met. So I'll be outlining to you what that criteria is and indicating how those principles could be applied to other streets in the suburbs that border on the CBD. Because the suburbs that border on the CBD, those parking spots serve not just private good, but a broader public good. So let's have a quick look at the Hankey Street context. Could we have the next slide? You'll see there, if you look at the slide, that mid-Hankey, it's called Hankey Street, but it's separated by steep staircases, and mid-Hankey is us in the middle, and Arlington Development is right next to us. And on the upper level, you're talking the Greenbelt and Nairn Street. You go down the steps, about 140 steps, and there's mid-Hankey. And then on the lower steps, again about 140 of them, and that takes you to Massey. So, and now if you can have a look at our street, and I'm just going to draw your attention to that. I'll speak to that as you all look at our street there up on the overhead. So I think you'll get it by basically looking at the overhead. So you'll see that on the right-hand side, we've got a extra wide 2.7 meter footpath that everyone uses, and 2.7 meters is just a tiny bit short of a single car driveway. Our street is 5.9 meters in actual width. The engineers say that we are missing the magic meter. If you take it, though, from that curve of the wide footpath way over to the edge of the narrow footpath on the embankment side, you get the 6.9 meters. And with that, you've got plenty of space. Because we're 5.9, you'll see that cars kind of park on the footpath, trying to get that 6.9 meters. If we can look at the next slide. Here's what the engineers gave us. And if you look at that slide, you'll see that the magic bit is 6.9. We're at 5.9, but see that little yellow square on the left-hand side? That's that footpath, which if that was declared road verge, we would have Hankey Street would be a rare example of a standard street in Wellington. Now, if we can, now, so what is Hankey Street going to do? The bylaw comes into effect on June 22nd, I understand, and that draws a de facto yellow line down one side of our street, and we lose half of our parking. But they call us the hopeful Hankeyites, because when we looked at the submission, we saw that question right there. It's number 23. And it says, how could the council best manage pedestrian and vehicle access and parking on narrow streets? Ooh, that's us. Where parking on the footpath has been commonplace. Oh, that's us again. They're talking about us. And then, this is not in your printed submissions, but on the form that people were given, staff wrote the following. For example, they wrote, adding broken yellow lines We don't think so. Providing additional signage? Oh, yeah. Remove unnecessary footpaths? Whoa! Or add new parking management. Well, that's just what we've been saying for years. But then we had another thought. Can we have the next slide? And we got another idea. And that one was widen the street where it is feasible and could be achieved in an enhanced maintenance operation. So we're not saying widen streets like crazy, but we're saying there may be some streets that contribute a lot of parking where maybe it's possible as part of maintenance to widen them a little bit.
Thanks,
We don't
Kate. You've
know.
got a minute left now of your session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shall we just go to the next slide? So those are the two options for Hankey, but these are options for other streets as well, which would be to remove the footpath on the one side, the embankment one, and on the other side, reduce it, borrow a meter, and you can still see we have a 1.7 meter wide footpath. So if we go to the next slide, this is our submission summary, that on suburbs bordering on the CBD, because these are parking spots with some public good, then if the footpath parking ban means half or more of the car parks are lost, then we're asking staff to have a closer look at those streets and ask, could it be widened? I mean, it's good to ask the question. And then second, as staff have suggested, what about footpath removal? Is it an unnecessary footpath? And the third one, if there's no other options, then the broken yellow line.
Thank you for that. So that is the end of your time on that one. So you'd now like to do your individual submission?
Yes.
Thank you.
And my individual submission is aligned with Hankey Street. So if we could have the next slide. The only tricky one is, how do we know if a footpath is unnecessary and can be removed? And we've suggested that there are three things that counselors or staff could look at. Does that footpath in question provide a substandard experience for pedestrians? Does the footpath, is there an alternative footpath that is a good one, that is popular and people use? So there has to be an alternative. And the third one, is there a wide neighborhood consensus that this is an unnecessary footpath? And could we have the next slide? And then, just very quickly, for Hankey Street, there's our unnecessary footpath. It's on the embankment. It dwindles out to nothing. It's overgrown, and it's narrow. And the next slide? We have a popular alternative. On the other side, it's 2.7 meters and a 1.8 meters at the other far end. So there's a wide footpath that people use. And then the third one, next slide. There's wide neighborhood consensus, and I assure you that there is. And then finally, this slide there is an example of an aerial view with Arlington filled in and yellow showing our walking paths. And you'll see that the one along the embankment just is not in the main flow. And then finally, there's a question that I know is brewing, and it's this one. If council fixes mid-Hankey, won't that create a dangerous precedent? Wellington has scores of streets like mid-Hankey, and I think we're ready for a fact check. Can we go to the next slide? In suburbs adjacent to Wellington Central, there are maybe 6 streets like Mid-Hankey. And what we're basing that on is Mount Cook Mobilize says that there's just one, Mid-Hankey. Mount Victoria says that there's 2, but actually Rixon Grove wouldn't qualify because they already have yellow lines all along it. So that just leaves Tutchin. Thorndon says that there are none to their knowledge, so that's 0. And we're looking at staff to give us numbers for the other 3 CBD bordering ones. So that brings us maybe to a total of 6. And the next slide. Yeah, those are the 2 that Mount Victoria put forward, and you can see that it's only the Tutchin one that would benefit from maybe looking at widening. I don't think that's an option. Eliminate a footpath, could be, or the yellow dotted lines, but it needs to be looked at. But there's not that many to look at, which is great news. And then finally, next slide. So there you go, 6 streets maybe to look at and to give some close attention to, and for council to say to staff, take a look at these 6 streets, see if you can save the parking without it costing council anything more than maintenance, and if you're going to eliminate a footpath, it has to meet strict criteria, and it has to not disadvantage pedestrians. But give them the authority to look at those options. That's all we're saying. A little bit of flexibility, and we could have a win-win for everyone. That would be such a great outcome. Win-win for everyone. And you know, the people of Mid-Hankey are putting a lot of faith in you folks. So please, the quality of mercy is not strained. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for your time. I think that's the last slide. It says thank you. Cheers.
has included planting, rubbish cleanups, removal of abandoned and wrecked cars, track maintenance, pest control, which is now in partnership with Capital Kiwi, and we do regular pest clearing exercises in Te Kaupahau, which is Wellington City Council's largest reserve, and also around the south coast from the Ahara Bay Visitor Centre to Red Rocks and beyond. We also encourage other four-wheel drive enthusiasts to join clubs that are in our association and to comply with managed access protocols so that people know how to behave and they behave properly, and that includes respect for all the environmental issues. We do education of public users, and sometimes that's in conjunction with police when they do an exercise and with council officers. We also host people, in other words, take them as passengers, who can't otherwise access remote or elevated places. And we have a lot of those great places around Wellington, and people love being able to actually go there and experience what they have to offer, but they can't get there. I'd like to just mention the Outer Green Belt Management Plan, which Council has renewed a few times, and most recently in 2019. And that has a number of provisions in there specifically allowing for vehicle access on unformed legal roads. But it assumes that that's under a managed access protocol. So it's not just open slather for people to go on these unformed legal roads or tracks or whatever, wherever they are, or beaches. Council is in control and issues permits, issues keys, provides supervision where necessary, or ensures that there is supervision. Of special significance is the so-called Red Rocks Road, which goes from the Ahara Bay Visitor Centre quite a long distance, like about 20 kilometres around the coast, but most people only know it up to Red Rocks and Sinclair Head. There's also networks of tracks elsewhere in Wellington City's purview that provide access to those remote and elevated places that people can't otherwise enjoy. On to the bylaws. Through Wellington's Cross-Country Vehicle Club, which is the largest four-wheel drive club in the country, we've been recommending for many years, in fact I think it's 21 years now, introduction of a bylaw to reduce the speed limit on that Red Rocks Road and to improve user behaviour. With a bylaw, that brings the power to prosecute offenders, and they can be fined or whatever. There are other examples where this has happened. For example, Horowhenua District Council introduced a bylaw at Foxton Beach, which reduces the speed limit along the whole beach to 30 kilometres an hour, and this goes for many kilometres. And in the high density areas where the public normally congregates, mainly in summer, that's reduced down to 5 kilometres an hour for that period, and sometimes it's closed. That was done through a bylaw. That was introduced around the time the Road Transport Act was updated, and police got in behind this and they prosecuted people. And it worked. People had their cars taken off them, in some cases their licences removed, in other cases they were fined. The word spread real fast, and the entire behaviour pattern has changed as a result, for the better. In Wellington CBD, I believe there's a bylaw that has reduced speed limits there, and that worked. On the Red Rocks Road, there are issues involving shared use of the track, and a bylaw that reduced the speed limit is one thing, but that bylaw could also introduce other requirements, such as vehicles must stay on the formed track or formed road rather than straying onto the beach or vegetation or whatever. And there could be other provisions in there. Again, at Horowhenua, some of those provisions are about not driving on grasses or vegetation. So clearly we actually support the introduction of a bylaw where the situation demands it. We understand though that the way it's being proposed in this current document doesn't necessarily meet the normal requirements of having to describe the specific problems for each unformed legal road and the management measures that are proposed for that road. So it appears to be more of a broad brush approach that's being taken. And we've been given advice that if that was adopted, it might be open to challenge in court. We do recommend that there be wider consultation with stakeholders with an interest in unformed legal roads, such as ourselves, our clubs. we haven't been consulted on this one. The first we knew about it was when the whole proposal was released. So none of our people were involved, and despite our significant relationship over a long period with the council. We spoke to the Walking Access Commission about this because they have a mandate to protect unformed legal roads throughout the country. And despite the name Walking Access Commission, their interests are for all forms of use of unformed legal roads. And we understand that they have made a submission and it raises a number of points similar to our ones. So what we'd like to propose is either delay the process of this bylaw to include some more thorough stakeholder consultation about the unformed legal roads, or else withdraw those provisions out of the proposal and include them in a future exercise. No matter which approach is taken, we would like to very strongly recommend that whatever goes in includes some managed access protocols that give very strict guidance about expected behaviours for the use of these places. And that's all I had to say, and excuse me reading it all out, but I'm not great at memorising speeches.
That was fantastic and very clear. Thank you very much. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yeah, just on the unformed legal road around to Red Rocks, what's the quality like at the moment? How recently have you been there, and what have you observed?
Personally, I haven't driven that for some months. There is another speaker over here who...
I'm aware of him.
who can give you the updated situation. But it depends on people's skill levels, their vehicles, and even the day of the week sometimes about the conditions. So usually it's drivable.
You mentioned Foxton Beach. How was that met by the community? You said it was quite successful. Was that sort of broadly supported? I think you said there was a 5 kilometre speed limit during the summer, and sometimes it's closed entirely?
Yes. What made it possible, that area that gets closed is in front of what they call the public car park in the surf club. There is an access point for vehicles at the north end of that area and at the south end. So vehicles wishing to drive the beach, which they are allowed to do, have to come off around the back of the car park and on again. At one time I was the chair of the Foxton Beach Community Society, so I've never been aware of any complaints or criticisms about that bylaw. It has worked.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Great. All right. Thanks again for your time. And keep safe. Thank you. Right. Peter from Forest and Bird, welcome to you. And if you just also go to the lectern, thank you. The lectern, yep, thank you.
Sorry. Right. You can hear me okay?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, that's great. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Forest and Bird. I represent nature, so they don't often get a voice, so we're here to do that. And I'm be speaking on very similar lines to the last speaker. So Forest and Bird supports the council proposal to restrict or prohibit vehicles on beaches. That's section 20. To us, it's a no-brainer, and we're pleased that the council will be in a position to police that and make sure that's upheld. We support council's proposal to have ability to control vehicle access to unformed legal roads. And I'm just going to cover just 2 points here. That's the harm to wildlife and the general permissions clause 20.2 in the bylaw. So there has been quite a lot of research and study with BirdLife response to vehicles on the shore, on the foreshore. A lot of that work has been done overseas, South Africa and Australia, and in our submission we mentioned one in New Zealand. But generally speaking, the studies have identified that wildlife and vehicles just don't match. And the interesting point is the bird life which they've studied overseas quickly, that paralleled here in New Zealand. We've got gulls, terns, dotterel, shag or cormorant, plover, and in our case, reef heron. And those are all species which they've studied overseas. Birds we're talking about, they have two options when they come across a vehicle. They either try to avoid it, or what they say is they escape, they take flight. And we've seen that on the beach when we're walking on the beach. We get too close to them, they fly off, or they run away. If they can't get far enough away from us, they'll take flight. That takes energy. It also is quite stressful for them. The vehicles on the foreshore introduce certain dangers to wildlife. They have nowhere to nest other than on the shore itself, either in the sand or in the rocks or in the bushes. So there's a great danger that the vehicles will run over the nests, kill the chicks, break the eggs. If a vehicle's in the vicinity, that might disturb the birds sufficiently that they'll abandon the whole place and go somewhere else. Penguins have nowhere to go, particularly when they're molting. They can't go into the sea. They'll drown. They're completely vulnerable. They can be quite stressed out if there's a vehicle either rushing past them or stationary. Obviously, the last speaker talked about the coastal road. On the maps, it's called the Great Harbour Way. That's a paper road. It's the longest road, obviously, around the coast. And because it's not often used, it's more likely that that's where the birds will be nesting. So they're more likely to be more affected by disturbance from vehicles than other areas because they're not used to seeing vehicles. And so those particular matters I just mentioned are more prevalent on that particular road. So the fact that the council is now introducing a bylaw which will control the vehicles going on that road and have the ability to make rules as to what they can and can't do. We fully support that. What the last speaker said, that's the sort of thing that we would expect the council to do. Keep the vehicles on the roads and not allow them to get off the road. And that will greatly reduce the ability for them to damage nests and interfere with foraging areas. If you looked on Google Map, you can see that there is the road, and then there are other roads that come off of it. So we would hope that would stop. Certainly speed is an issue. They've shown with those the studies that if a vehicle's travelling too fast and the wildlife is not used to that, they could actually get run over. They won't take evasive action quick enough. So in addition to that, what we would like to see is monitoring. We would like to see the council introduce monitoring of wildlife along that road so that we can see for certain how vehicles are affecting each of the species of wildlife which live on that road. Moving on to the clause 22, it's a permission for an event. The council is pretty wide open on that. It doesn't actually say what sort of event they would permit vehicles to go on to the beaches. So we're saying that you just make it up. We would like to see the conditions under which you could park a vehicle on a beach other than for launching boats. We can't think of any event where it would be necessary to put a vehicle on a beach. But I think it's to be fair to everybody, we should all see what the conditions are that the council would allow someone to park on a beach. Things like time of day, time of year, which beach, duration. We're thinking sort of forest and bird. We're thinking of when penguins, say, are on the beach, or when dotterels are more likely to be nesting. All those sorts of issues we would expect the council to consider when they allow a vehicle to park on a beach. And so that basically it's transparency what we're after in that area. So I've got no other points to make. If you've got any questions.
Thank you very much. That was great. Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, Peter. Thank you. My question was around the Great Harbour Way. Are there particular beaches that you see a lot of car activity on at the moment around there that are within the Wellington City Council area?
I can't answer that myself, but I know someone who can answer that, and it's the next speaker.
Cool.
I think it's the next speaker. No, I honestly I can't answer that, but on that particular road, we do know that there are people who are not as well organised and controlled as the four-wheel drivers and the people who belong to the clubs. We are aware that they do cause a lot of trouble.
Cool. And then
yeah.
Just my second question. So this has come up at the Regs committee before at council around which activities we permit around our coast. And for example, car race around the peninsula. It's not on the beach, but it's close. And the argument there was that because it's not done during dawn or dusk, penguins aren't at risk. But are there other seabirds that might be at risk that you would see up on the shoreline that might be at risk during?
I'll correct you on that one. You say penguins won't be there because it's dawn and dusk?
Well, they won't be, migrating or as active if it's during the daylight hours. That was the answer that we had.
That's not quite correct, because if the penguin is molting, it'll be there. Irrespective of what time of day it is, it'll be there. You may not be able to see it, but they will be molting. So that's one point. The other point was? You have to, sorry.
Oh, right. What other seabirds would we be looking out for during the middle hours of the day that might be coming up onto the road? Or rather, this is something I can Google, but it was just in case it was on the top of your head.
What birds will be available? Will be around?
Yeah, up and around the roads.
Yeah, well, oyster catchers for one. Dotterel will be there.
Yeah.
What else have we got? Gulls. Surprisingly, the red-billed gull is actually in decline. So they'll be there. All the usual bird species that you see when you're walking around will be there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Keep safe. That was very helpful. Sorry, we've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Daniel. Warm welcome to the to the lectern. Sorry again. Thank you.
I'm here unironically and confusingly because the two previous speakers, my partner and I both own four-wheel drive vehicles that are built for off-road, and we use them off-road. and I'm also a former senior car show judge for the Sports Car Club of America. Let me say I fully support what the gentleman from Forest and Bird said. Hook, line, and sinker. Further, I'd suggest that we ban off-roading within 20 kilometers of city centers. There's a lot of New Zealand out there. We can use it. We've got vehicles to get to it. And though we own those 2 vehicles, I'm looking forward to eventually owning none and only renting a vehicle when I need to leave town. I don't, the overheads of owning these things are pretty large, and the parking is pretty horrible, and the parking's not going to get better. I don't see a fix for that. I admire you for trying. I respect the effort, but it ain't going to happen. Now, there are things we can do about that. Car share is a start. Mevo and city car share are small and good options and need to spread, but also, I used to live in Asia, and mini cars are a fine option. Citroën has a couple variations out now called the Ami and the Ami Cargo. They are utterly tiny. They are supposed to be available from the Citroën dealer in Lower Hutt within the next 6 months. And they are perfect for around-town vehicles and ideal for rental vehicles. And there are tons of competitors all through Asia, and an exciting new one out of Italy called the Microlino. I recommend looking it up. It's awesome. And it's built to be crash rated, which is something that we should look at because, hey, ACC, safety, all those good things. Another consideration is that people under 30, sadly, seem to be getting poorer, especially in Wellington. I know a lot of them, and very few of them ever aspire to, well, home ownership for one, but car ownership for another. They think that it is an implausible overhead, and those that can drive would like a cheaper option to Mevo, which is, of course, expensive. Please, when it comes to cars, on-street parking, and all the rest, do not feel that taxes and use fees are the way out of this. Taxes are a minor inconvenience for the wealthy folks, which is most of us homeowners in Wellington, as you rate things these days, and they just make the poor folks suffer. If you're going to have taxes and have fees, scale them to make the rich folks suffer evenly with the poor, as I believe Finland does. The parking topic is a topic that's fully inseparable from growth, also inseparable from housing access and climate change. We want to have fewer privately owned cars, whether they're electric or not, because electric cars still use resources and are still expensive economically. Separately, in my last 3 minutes and 19 seconds, I was lucky enough to be in the US when the Americans with Disabilities Act was implemented in 1990 and got to watch the changes in the United States after that. And a thing that any academic paper that you bring up on the topic will show you is that changes made for the benefits of the disabled benefit the entire community widely and broadly. If there is a wheelchair access, hey, it makes mums with strollers have lives easier. It makes old cripples with bad feet like me who have, when we're dragging our suitcases going to try to get to the airport, hey, I can just drag the suitcase down the curb cut. For those of you who haven't, please rent a motorized wheelchair and try to get through all of downtown Wellington. Then try it in a non-motorized wheelchair. We have a great new Sheraton Doubletree Hotel, which has only disabled access rooms, but no disabled access elevator. You can't get your wheelchair into the elevator. You can get your wheelchair into any of the showers. That's great, but kind of useless that way. And watch out for those little hurdles. They kept the elevator because they liked the brass doors. To pull any of these things off as a city is slightly crazy, but you can set some precedent to lead the rest of the country in the right direction. And that's part of why I moved to Wellington 13 years ago. I think this is a forward-thinking place, and I would like to see it live up to that potential. The other things that I would, of course, those of you who've heard me before know I will shout for. One of the best things you could do is make all the buses free and encourage public transit. How you do that? Hey, you're professionals. I trust you on this. But yes, the more free public transit you have, the better things get. I've seen this happen in American cities such as Seattle. I've seen this happen in European cities. Car use goes down when free buses happen. My final point is, when it's 2050, and those of you who are still lucky enough to be around, assuming that's a lucky thing in 2050, look back on these decisions, what will you have been proud of? Will it be brave, forward-looking decisions, or would it be protecting a nice 20th century status quo? And that's a minute for Q&A. Anybody? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, everybody.
Good afternoon, councillors. Kia ora. Today I'm representing the Automobile Association, to make that clear. As you're probably aware, the Automobile Association's got a large number of members, but we're not just motorists. All of our members are on occasion pedestrians and an increasing number of cyclists. I ride an e-bike to work. We also note that with Wellington's topography, there's very limited space in some areas to accommodate separate footpaths and road space. Overall, we support most of the proposed changes, but there's some which we're not happy with, which I'll now elaborate on. The first one is suggesting it would be an offence to park over or across more than one marked metre space has good intent, but doesn't reflect that some people visiting like large motorhomes sometimes take up 2 spaces. And we've suggested that if that's the case, as long as they pay for 2 parks, they should be allowed to park in 2 parks. Because you said later on that in clause 28.1, you can allow parking for both spaces if a vehicle has a trailer. It's quite a simple fix. We've got concerns regarding clauses regarding enabling temporary road changes for pilot and trial schemes, because in our view, the process for designing the trial cycle lane on Brooklyn Road has not been managed well, and we were disturbed that construction has commenced before the independent safety audit had been completed. We support the proposed bylaw to limit the use of trailers for advertising purposes, as these are a distraction for road users and represent a potential safety hazard. We don't support the proposed clause to allow council to remove motorhomes parked on a public street that have not been moved for 7 days. Motorhomes are a registered motor vehicle and should be allowed to park on the street the same as other vehicles like cars. Many cars are not used during the week as the owners take public transport to work, assuming the buses are running. Council already has mechanisms to restrict vehicle parking in inner city suburbs such as residence parking and coupon parking. We acknowledge that it's technically an offence for any part of a motor vehicle to park on a footpath. We also acknowledge and support the current council policy, which I'm not sure is current or not, of allowing one wheel of a car to park on a footpath as long as at least 1 metre of footpath remains for pedestrians. You've asked for comment on how could council best manage pedestrian and vehicle access and parking on narrow streets where parking on the footpath has been commonplace. We suggest the following ideas merit consideration. We consider limiting parking on footpaths to specific narrow streets or those with large numbers of trucks, e.g. Ofero Road. Consider marking with dotted white paint on the footpath the limit that vehicles can park on a specific footpath. We understand one Australian state has adopted this practice and basically puts a dotted yellow line a few hundred millimetres down the side of the curb, and that is the line that you're not allowed to cross. As house occupiers on many narrow streets occupy old houses with no off-street parking, they have no choice but to park on the street or an adjacent street. Therefore, restricting parking with dotted yellow lines may cause parking congestions on other streets. We accept that sufficient width for emergency vehicles must be maintained at all times, and with larger and wider vehicles, some streets may no longer be suitable for parking on both sides of the road. Alternatively, signage could be used limiting parking to vehicles not exceeding a specific width, but then that means people have got to get a tape measure out. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. Just wanting to understand the process that you go through in terms of preparing a submission like this. Do you go to all your members, or is there an exec committee which, coordinates?
Happy to answer that.
Yeah.
We have a council of about 12 members. The timetable for this submission was only a month. We're not able to consult all our 200,000 members in a month. So what normally happens is that the submission is sent out to all the councillors and we discuss the issue at our last council meeting.
Thank you, Alex. Can I just follow on from that? When people join the AA, I understand it's generally to, if your car breaks down, do they take a political stance on or a policy stance on a number of issues affecting drivers? And what's the process for doing that?
Okay. In terms of policy, we have a motoring affairs branch, and motoring affairs handles policy issues. We're often consulted by motoring affairs to give a local view on what certain policies are coming out from the government. But in general, the Wellington district doesn't make ad hoc policy decisions of its own. It's covered nationally.
Thank you very much, and keep safe. Right, we've now just got a little break until 2:45, so feel free. Yep, and yes, we are all going to keep our distance just because we prepare to go into level 2. Thank you. Councillor Rush and Condi, could you sit down if that's... Yeah, I know, but if you could just sit down and we've just got to keep moving, please. We've got a busy day tomorrow, so we just want to finish while giving our submitters the time that they deserve. Right, so Mike, welcome to you. Thank you very much for being here. Oh, right, okay. All right, off you go. Do you want to signal at 9 minutes or will you be okay? Okay, great, thank you.
That the proposed bylaw is a pretty good one. And I'd particularly like to congratulate you on undoing the decision of previous council to allow parking on footpath and to not enforce what is in fact the law of the land and abrogating responsibilities to a large part of the Wellington public. So good on you. It will cause problems. You heard suggestions from the AA about how that could be amended. I put some in my submission. And it's a process that I believe has to happen. Going to the detail of the document, I suppose the most positive thing I can say about the document as a document is that it sort of reads like a first draft. It doesn't read like a document that should be out there in the public eye. I'll give you a few examples. The introduction says it enables the introduction of shared paths. Well, it doesn't do that at all. It enables the priorities of shared paths to be defined, but it doesn't say anything about the introduction of them, and it has rather a bizarre paragraph of how important shared paths are, which I hope is not council policy. The similar applies to berms. The introduction says it bans parking on berms, but the actual it makes it conditional on if it causes damage or this and that. It's not an absolute ban, as the introduction implies. And if it's dependent on damage, you can say, well, was it this vehicle or that vehicle that caused the damage? Whereas if it's an absolute ban, it's easy to enforce. One last comment, which is on parking in general rather than on this document in particular, is that there's been recent publicity about extending the hours of metered parking in the evenings. There is one provision in the document that has been there since 2000 and parking policy of 2007, I think it was, which is having demand responsive fees for parking. Demand responsive means that you have a limit set of how many spaces are vacant. So normally it's something like 80 or 85% of spaces are taken. You always have 15 or 20% of spaces available, and you achieve that by pricing. Now, if you've got that in place, you don't have to suddenly make a decision that you will increase the time things are charged for by 2 hours, because the data will tell you that. The data will say the level of charge you need to have before you introduce pricing. And you could apply it across the whole, and the challenge of finding a car park properly implemented would disappear, because there would always be spaces available. There's an excellent book which I've recommended to previous councils, which is The High Cost of Free Parking by Donald Shoup, which is probably living in a warehouse somewhere in Johnsonville. I mean, it sounds deathly dull, but it's actually very interesting, and with case studies about what you can do. It's been council policy since 2007 or 8 to have 85%, I think it is, occupancy rate. It would be really nice if you actually introduced it. Thank you.
Great submission, and apologies for not giving you a warning. I was just kind of thinking of you as living streets, and very clear. Thank you very much. And do keep safe, okay? Thank you.
Hey.
Right, Kirk, welcome to you. Is he? He's not here, right? Ian Hutchings, are you here? Oh, Ian, you're an old hand. You know this. Sorry, you know this stuff backwards. Welcome back.
No, you can help me a lot. Thank you for the opportunity. How do we make this thing go? Oh, there. Okay, here we go. Right, here we go. Look, we have about proposed Part 19 and Part 20 of the bylaw, and we've subtitled this "When is a problem not a problem?" It's when you don't actually define what the problem is. Making any bylaw, you have to start at the beginning, and you say, what is the problem we're trying to deal with? And we don't know. Our submission, unfortunately, before you is not what we gave you. It's been cut and pasted to fit into a computerised format, and we think it's suffered. It doesn't follow your headings. It lacks structure now. It's just a continuous string of text. There's no emphasis, and it lowers the credibility of it. And you'll see the top few sentences are readable and clear. The presentation we have before you is the bottom string of text, which is frankly pretty difficult to read if you even wanted to. And the fonts are exactly the same. That's the font you've got compared to the font we gave you. So I encourage you to get a copy of our submission rather than rely on what the office has given you, because it's different. So we start the process of making a bylaw. We say, what's our problem? And move on. And this came off a website from Lower City, I think. Determine what the problem is. Is a bylaw the most appropriate way of dealing with it? What are the pros and cons of this, that, or a bylaw? And then you decide what to do. Unfortunately, for 19 and 20, you jumped straight to a bylaw. You said, let's have a bylaw. So whether you're making a bylaw that gives you a power, as you are in Part 19, to deal with unformed legal roads, or whether you're making a bylaw to do something specific, it doesn't matter. You've got to follow the process to make the bylaw. And we respectively say, you've omitted the steps of telling us what the problem is. We can't submit on a problem that we don't know is there. We can't debate an issue which is not identified. There's some material in your scope. They don't relate to Part 9 or Part 19 or Part 20. They are all about the rest of the bylaw. And the rest of the bylaw about parking on footpaths and berms, all of that is great. You've done a good job there. Good luck with your deliberations, but it's nothing to do with Part 19 or 20. So we do encourage you to think carefully about what the problem you're trying to solve is before you rush to a solution. 3.11, the perceived problem, doesn't talk about legal roads, doesn't talk about beaches. It does give some examples. It gives some examples which don't seem to have a problem, but there are examples quoted, so we thought we'd dig them out and let you know where they were. In ULR, unformed legal roads, you say, your words, for most of these roads, they provide necessary access, driving or parking that does not cause negative impacts. And yet, most of it doesn't cause an impact. You're proposing a citywide bylaw. So we don't understand. We thought we'd just go through the examples you've given us of where these unformed legal roads you've quoted are. First one is Noel Ashton Way. I'm not sure anybody knows where it is. I challenge you to have been on it. There it is. It's starts at the top left at the end of South Macra Road. It dives away, goes up the hills. It's about 8 kilometres long. It comes down at the beach again. It's a private road on private land, 0 houses. We don't know how that's a problem to council. And we don't know how you'd ever possibly make a bylaw that deals with private land. So, Netherley Street is in Seatoon. It's a nice little bushy hillside. It goes, this one should work up and down, does it? There it is. It goes up there. Where's the green line gets lost somewhere. When I go off the screen, it doesn't do it. It's on the right-hand side, going up and down, just on the right-hand side of that red piece. It's a nice little bit of hillside. It's a legal road. It provides a driveway to some house, and someone bought a piece off you a few years ago. There's no parking problem there. There's no issue there. No one's identified, as far as we can tell, about a problem. Heath Street. Now, I do have a problem in Heath Street. It's in Johnsonville. I know it well. I lived there 40 years. Again, this cursor thing disappears when I do put it in the middle for some reason. Heath Street goes through the middle of Alex Moore Park. Alex Moore, M-O-O-R-E, after the settler, not M-O-R. Goes straight down the middle, and there's park on both sides. You've got a chain across it, so you can't drive up there. It's a bit of a concrete wall, so you can't drive up it. No one drives on Alex Moore Park. But you could tidy it up legally by, in fact, chopping off the bit that's road and chopping off the bit that's park and dealing with it legally and solving it, which probably I should have done and my councillors before me should have done 20 years ago. But, okay, there's a problem there, but it doesn't justify a bylaw. It's a specific problem caused by a specific problem of council putting a park on legal road. Easy, stop the vote and fix it. You don't actually want to stop people by a bylaw. You want to actually take the road and make it as a part of the park completely. The South Coast grab bag, there's a bit of stuff in your later material about the South Coast, which I thought I'd just run through. And just to clarify, we don't have any problem with a speed limit on the South Coast.
Ian, sorry, you've run out of time, so are you able just to wrap it up?
10 minutes?
Yes.
You
Did you give?
I'm sorry?
Apologies. You do have another 5 minutes. Apologies.
Thank you. Most vehicles can't travel much more than 20, 30 kilometres round on the road anyway because it's bumpy and lumpy and it goes up and down. But you can make a speed law there under your existing speed law provisions. You don't need a new bylaw to do it. In fact, the new bylaw wouldn't be the right way to do it. You'd do it under your existing rules. It's no different to any other piece of legal road. You can make a speed law if you want. Enforcement may be an issue, but that's not the question we're dealing with now. And by the way, this consultation process did not propose there was a problem with the speed limit on the South Coast. So trying to make a second stab at it and saying that's why we want to do it is really a bit sneaky, really. But anyway, at South Coast, vehicles get stuck. Does council get them out? No, not normally. Other users pull them out within an hour or so. Dumping of abandoned vehicles, yes, it does happen. Not much, but no worse than other places on the street. We find abandoned vehicles with warrants of fitness and registration out of date. You've got a few weeks to get rid of them. Damage to coastal ecology, yes. If they go off track, you can damage the coastal ecology. We don't support going off track. Stay on the road. Disturbing wildlife, well, vehicles might do it. We're talking about the seals mainly around there. More walkers than four-wheel drivers go to the seals. And wildlife disturbance can be done by anybody, dogs, people, whatever. Not just four-wheel drivers. Road viability issues, well, there are always road viability issues. The question is, would making a bylaw change those? They're occurring by natural causes, and your bylaw won't change that. It'll be whatever it is. Again, the increased risk of, or maybe from lapfalls, you're really struggling, I think, to put that under the criteria in the Land Transport Act about where you can make bylaws. They limit what you can make bylaws about on legal roads under section 22AB. Nothing about rockfalls in there. Protecting poaching and antisocial behaviour. This is reported comments from landowners. There are only 3 landowners around there. We don't know who would make those comments, but certainly antisocial behaviour comes from lots of people. It doesn't come from just four-wheel drivers. It comes from mountain bikers and all sorts of people. Making a bylaw isn't going to help change that. And poaching is not your responsibility, with due respect. It's MAF's responsibility. And we work with MAF to try and avoid it. So we think South Coast is a complicated issue, and you should have a proper discussion process about it. You have said on your website you're not proposing to change the vehicle restrictions on the South Coast. And if that's your intention, why are we having a proposed bylaw? I think councils are confused. You say they don't cause negative impact in most cases, and yet then you say you're not able to properly manage issues. What are the issues you're trying to manage? If there's no negative impact, what are you trying to manage? Especially using the criteria in the Land Transport Act, which are quite limited. On the red rocks, you say you're not going to change it. You say you might need it in the future for something that's clearly not known now. So making a bylaw for something that might or might not happen in the future is not a valid reason to do it. Final comment on legal roads. We really think that there's no problem identified. There's no discussion of what the alternatives are. The process is not in accordance with the requirements as we see it. We think council should pull it back on Part 19, start a process again, have a think about it, go into a discussion process, work out a policy, and get on with the job properly. On beaches, very quickly, we think it's another one of these, let's do it. There's been no prior policy consultation. The process doesn't appear to be following that recommended. It's said to be beaches aren't reserved, and it identifies Macra Beach, but Macra Beach is a legal road. It's clearly on a map a legal road. You've got a scenic reserve there, that's your problem to deal with, nothing to do with legal roads. Just manage the legal road, it's simple. Are you proposing to stop vehicles using or driving on the beaches? Yes, we're going to do that, great. However, as soon as you pass the bylaw as proposed, a lot of current activities become illegal. If we drive around the south coast on the legal road and stop on the beach, probably we breached the bylaw. We can't stop and have lunch and come back. You've got to keep on driving for some reason. I don't know how you do that. It's just an immediate impact on all sorts of things that go on together. If you're worried about urban beaches, we've given you a submission process in there. We've given some words which would control your bylaw to urban beaches. But we don't think what I call the remote beaches need a bylaw, and we don't think it's a sensible thing to do. And they can be solved by other means. We think you should withdraw Part 20 to do it properly. We don't mind limitation on urban beaches, not a problem, not an issue, but we're giving you suggestions and wording for the bylaw in our submissions. Thank you for the opportunity and good luck with your park discussions.
That was perfectly timed, Ian. I can see your experience coming through. Thank you very much for that detailed submission. That was really helpful. Thank you. Right, Yvonne, welcome to you.
Kia ora. I have got PowerPoint, so how do I just push the button? Okay, cool. I live in Lyell Bay, and it's a flat area. Love to have their toys. Oh, just a minute, what happened there? They love to have their toys and caravans and boats, and also an occasional, probably sort of business type vehicle. So my submission is primarily about them and the bugbear that I have probably with this one particular caravan. I put a fix-it ticket on and then they say they've moved it, and I can't actually tell whether they've moved it or not. During lockdown, it was outside my house for 3 months last year. I accepted that because I didn't think that was a problem, but at the moment it is a problem because I have a driveway. I park my car off the road. This is the view that I get if I'm trying to look up the road and it's people whiz down on it. So car, it's fine, but a caravan, it's a problem. Within the area that I'm in, probably less than 500 metres, I have business sort of vehicle sort of type things, boats, and this particular boat and trailer are on Wah Street, which is near Elements, which is always a really busy area, and they clearly can park off the road, these vehicles. I have vehicles that park on the footpath for no apparent reason. This is Toru Street, and it's a very wide street and hardly anyone, it's not a racetrack or anything, so I'm not sure why they're parking on the footpath. But then across the road, we've got a boat that does the same thing, and that's probably been there, I don't know, for the last year. So my plea is for people to consider what I suggested that 500 metres movement after 7 days is probably not, it's not a big enough deterrent for people to find an alternative place to park what I consider their toys. And I would suggest that a kilometre would be a really good deterrent in the bylaw, that after 7 days they have to move it a kilometre away. And it would make sense because a lot of these streets in the Lyell Bay Kilberry area seem to have a prevalence of lots of little toys like this within the area. I just think that it's worthwhile thinking about other things, like perhaps a permit on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, that they have to park these vehicles on the street. And then if they don't move their vehicle or, within that kilometre or 500 metres, they forfeit their permit and they have to reapply for it. So I'm all for trying to get these vehicles off the street. And the other thing is, I don't want this happening. This happened just after lockdown. I know that you're trying to stop this, but this was happened just in one day that I looked at. I know you're stopping this hopefully now. I haven't seen it as much. But when I objected to this, I was told, we've looked at it and people can get past it. So I hope this is something that you stop. happening, because I don't think a wheelchair or someone with a pram or any, pushchair can get past the old Toyota vehicle there. And that's me. Plea to do something about those unmotorised vehicles primarily. End of my life.
Thank you, Yvonne. Any questions? Councillor Rush.
Thanks, Yvonne. A lot of sympathy with you. Have you spoken to the owners?
The whole community has spoken to those owners of the caravan because they live down a long driveway, and they claim that they could park it off-road, but then 2 other cars would come onto the street. I don't actually think that's true. I think they can't actually turn the caravan in the tight site that they've got. But I've had altercations with them. The neighbours have. People that had a young baby and asked them to move it if they could, got abused, that they were able to park the trailer, the caravan for 7 days. Let's face it, some neighbours don't understand how you make a neighbourhood and how you a community. And I'd have to say that these caravan owners would probably be it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I have spoken to them. No, it's theirs. They only use it occasionally on holiday weekends or over Christmas. So predominantly it's parked on the street, predominantly outside my house. And as I said, as a toy, I can't use that toy. They block my view. Every time I go out the drive, I worry that I am about to get hit by a car coming down Queen's Drive. So.
I've got one in Rose.
Thank you. Yvonne, can I just quickly ask you, is that common around Lyle Bay as a whole?
I think it's common in the flat area, like in Kilburnie as well, because I can remember residents complaining about car parking around Kilburnie, and they talked about Ross Street. And when I drove down Ross Street, I think there was three boats on Ross Street. They're complaining about people coming into the area, but actually their own locals have the problem as well. So yeah, it's a flat area, so you can park your toys on the street quite easily. So
right. Okay, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
Declan, who is going to appear by Zoom. Welcome. That should be enforced against that. They should.
Excuse me, Chair. I saw a message from Declan saying his PC didn't have a mic or a camera, and I suggested to officers that he should dial in.
I had also messaged Declan, and he had said that he had figured it out and was able to join.
Oh, he did.
Okay.
Sorry, he said that he could.
Okay.
Declan, can you hear us? Yep.
No, his camera's actually on.
Oh. Anyway, sorry. Declan, can you hear us? It might not work. So look, he might just need to come and do public participation at some point. Okay, so what we'll do, committee, is that we will get in touch and then he can come to another committee meeting and make a submission there. That's not a problem. Right, Barry, are you there? Welcome. There you go. Well, you've possibly got a bit of extra time now. I think you wanted a bit of flexibility, so there you go.
I'll try and keep it close to the mark. Hey, most of you know me. I've got a batch out on the south coast, and I'm involved in a number of community issues. Councillors, with some respect, I think you've been hoodwinked in respect to the commentary around driving on beaches and the unformed legal roads. At the last minute, I elected to change my presentation, which you've now got in front of you, the PowerPoint presentation and my notes I was going to talk to. I'd ask you to look at those in your time, and I will just talk a little bit about, I was going to say process, the way I've had to come here today and point out some matters that have been before you in earlier documents. In the Strategy and Policy Committee papers of 22 April, at various points, you, the councillors, were told this report asks the committee to agree to consult with the community. The consultation would provide you the opportunity to gather information. The public consultation process is designed to bring any public concerns and suggestions. And another point, in June, it said June 21, Strategy and Policy Committee hears oral submissions. The vision looks good, but what about reality? As the most well-known person out on Red Rocks coastline, I can assure you the design of the consultation, remember that's the words the officers used, has for most part failed to reasonably engage with or solicit the views of those potentially most involved. That's the stakeholders in your language. Looking now at the final traffic statement proposal, the document as it applies to beaches and unformed legal roads contains numerous inaccurate or incorrect statements. Equally, I'd point out the material contained in written correspondence from officers falls below what I'd see as an acceptable standard. As someone seen as a friend of council, my plea would be for you to withdraw these sections unless you can be satisfied there's been adequate consultation, and I don't believe there has been. In the April strategy and policy paper I alluded to, officers wrote June 21 Strategy and Policy Committee hears oral submissions. On 16 June, with a PowerPoint presentation ready to go, a democracy advisor writes that she understood that the oral submissions would be by way of forum process. And that's where groups of submitters would get around a table. Quite different to what we're led to believe. Then just 7 days afterwards, we'll be using a formal hearing process. So you've jumped from one to the other and then back again. The whole process from start to finish points towards a need to look inwards, acknowledge the mistakes, and give the community an undertaking you can do better. My final point concerns the quality of material that officers had put in front of them. The briefing paper initially supplied to you for today's meeting included submissions of a number of folk. My name appears on page 52. It is an absolute mistruth that my submission was going to be about footpaths, the elderly and the disabled. In years gone by, a politician during a select committee hearing questioned me why he should believe anything I said or wrote. And that was because I had a legislative date wrong by 1 year. That mistake was infinitesimal compared to having the wrong detail regarding someone's submission. Questions around responsibility need to be raised. Regrettably, this was not the only mistake. Poor old Peter Hunt, an earlier submitter, Peter's not here now. Peter made a strong submission, in his eyes, not mine, but never mind, that may fit uncomfortably with others. In his case, officers have seen fit, for reasons that baffle me, to disclose his personal phone number. So Peter's phone number, which should have been deleted under the privacy provisions, has been included in the papers that you have in front of you and appeared on the web. Another balls up. That said, to be fair, I will finish by making just a formal acknowledgement about Claire Barlow, who's down the back there. She was made aware of some issues about my submission, and I think she acted excellent. She was excellent in the way she picked it up and resolved the issue. So I'd just like to acknowledge that, and I would encourage you to ask Claire to summarise the issues that I brought forward to her, and perhaps she could tell you how these issues can be addressed to minimise problems occurring again.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Barry. Sorry, Councillor Fitzsimons, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, well, since you've given me the chance, just going back to the substance of your submission.
Yeah.
What's the key? Your key
The key thing is
that you're asking for?
Documentation said there would be consultation with the community. There has been none. I'll speak with a broad hat, which includes that of the four-wheel drivers. We would like to join with council and participate and resolve issues. But we've got to be told what the issues are and be invited to the table to talk about them. So at this point of time, I would say the sections that relate to the beaches and unformed legal roads, set them aside, move on with the rest of your bylaw, and we can look at this later on.
All right. Thank you very much. That was very clear. Thank you very much,
Madam
Barry.
Chair, can I just maybe make a comment on the unfortunate changes and just give a bit of an explanation to the submitter?
No, you can't, actually. Not at the moment. You can talk to Barry afterwards. We've just got one more submitter. And if there is anything that needs a response, we will do that. Thank you. Right, Mark, welcome to you. You're most welcome here.
I've got two bits to my submission. The first bit is a carry on from previous people on parking on the footpaths, and it's mainly in streets in the area that I live in the northern suburbs, and a lot of the vehicles that do it are either your contractors or people employed by your council as contractors parking on the footpath when there's only one footpath down the street. And it's completely unacceptable. They completely block the footpath and they damage the footpaths. And I think you need to be out there more often. If people are parked on the footpath and there isn't enough room for a parent with a double pram to go past the vehicles, then they need to be towed away into it and force people, if there's only one footpath, to park on the opposite side of the road. There's no need to be parking on the footpaths, and I live in a street that's only got one footpath on one side of the road, and there's no reason to be parking on it. The other side of it is your proposal in the Thorndon Quay to take away all the angle parking. Now, I use all forms of transport, and for your proposal, you've only catered to two, that's cycles and buses. The only form that I don't use is a taxi. I've never had a taxi licence, and you are compromising my ability to stop and make deliveries, to turn my truck around if I've got to make a delivery, by taking all the parking away in the mornings and at night. There's no provision whatsoever for any parking. That's going to compromise all the businesses down there, where are their workers going to park? And if I have to bring a vehicle in and I'm not taking the bus, where am I going to stop to go and pick up stuff you can't carry on a bicycle, can't carry on a bus? And as a cyclist, I can see reversing lights and brake lights on vehicles coming out. If I've showed up and I was a parent with little kids and I've parallel parked, I've got no way of stopping my kid in the right back seat from opening the door. And Wellington's wind, it throws the thing open, and if a bus or truck doesn't kill that child, if I'm the cyclist, it's going to get me every time. So I think the way you've addressed this, taking all the angle parking out all the way along Thorndon Quay and the Hutt Road, is a retrospective effect, and it's hugely dangerous to everybody except for pedestrians.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions, but possibly not on Thorndon Quay, because we had hearings on that yesterday. Look, I have asked our Chief Planner, Mr Hodgetts, to follow up with the Chief Operating Officer on the issue of our vehicles parking on footpaths, if there are, because it's not acceptable if that has been happening. So we will just look into that. And can you get back to Mr Spears? Thank you very much. As part of the report back.
When you're considering, you need to make sure that there's adequate loading zones outside businesses on the main thoroughfares, because I was a courier for 2 years. I currently drive a truck. If you don't give me provision and keep taxis and Ubers off it, I'm going to be parking on your cycleways and your footpaths because that's the only option I have. You're saying that you're going to have bus stops every 5 minutes. You need to have a loading zone within 30 seconds of every business because we have 50 to 100 kilogram boxes to deliver, and trying to send us into side streets that you've got to back into and can't get out of is just not an option.
All right, thank you very much for your feedback, much appreciated. Well, that actually does conclude the meeting because our last submitter isn't able to attend. So I'm now going to, who would like to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Matthews, or Councillor Rush, would you like to second? Thank you very much. Right, is there any debate? Okay, so I'm now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Could people please vote? Thank you so much. That is fantastic. All right, and we are now at 2 for the karakia. Una here, ki te tapanui. Kia wātia, mama, te nāko, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatu, koe ara e ronga, whakaria ake ke runga. Kia wātia, aira kua wātia. Kia ora everyone, thank you.